Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Can everybody here all see and hear everybody else? If I can just get a nod would be great. Excellent. I believe, firstly, thank you to everybody who's joining. I think we have around 160 people and more joining as we continue going today. Firstly, I'd like to ask Brother Rahman from Ashaadibi Center to recite a verse from the Quran for us, please. Brother Rahman.
Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات وأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم. يوم تبيض وجوه وتسود وجوه فأما الذين اسودت وجوههم أكفرتم بعد إيمانكم فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكفرون. وأما الذين بيضت وجوههم ففي رحمة الله هم فيها خالدون. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وما الله يريد ظلما للعالمين. صدق الله العظيم. جزاكم الله خيرا.
Thank you very much, Brother Rahman. Before we go to the substantive, could I ask Shaykh Ashiq, who is the Imam of Darul Ummah Masjid, just to give us a brief explanation as to the verse that was recited so wonderfully by Brother Rahman.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Rahman, with his very beautiful melody, recited some beautiful verses of the third chapter of the Holy Quran, Surah Ali Imran, in which God the Almighty is telling us that وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, that the followers of the Prophet Muhammad and the nation that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, left behind are people that want goodness for society at large. And our speciality, or the fact that we claim to be Muslims, we submit to our Creator, we want good for our society, is exemplified by the fact that we come together for good actions. Like today, for example, when we are coming together for something we believe to be a greater good for our community. And then he carried on to speak about some verses, or recite some verses which speak about the next life and the hereafter. I think this is the gist of the message, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shaykh Ashiq. We have quite a large number of participants, so we shall begin. Today we're getting together for this meeting in relation to the DFE guidance on relationship and sex education. As most parents know, the guidance sets down principles which schools should adhere to. The local borough, the borough of Tower Hamlets, issued its own guidance. That guidance itself has caused a lot of parents concern, anxiety, and raised a number of questions. I will get back to the background of some of the meetings that they've had with the East London Mosque and others. But parents have raised a number of questions. And today we are given the opportunity to understand the questions and the issues that they have and answer, possibly try and answer how they may raise those questions with the local authority and the schools. Firstly, we have but Brother Dilowar Khan and Sister Sufia Alam, they're both from the East London Mosque and the London Muslim Centre. Sheikh Abdul Qayum, who's the Khatib of East London Mosque, is also on the panel here today. We have Sheikh Ahmed Arshe, who is from Ashaadibi Masjid. And you've already heard from Sheikh Ashiq, who is the Imam of Darul Ummah. We have Sheikh Shamsuddauha. A lot of people in the borough will know him from Ibrahim College. We have a gentleman who's an educationalist, Noor Choudhury. Noor has been working with parents and schools, helping them understand the DFE guidance. And then we have Samantha Knights, my very good friend, Samantha Knights, Queen's Counsel from Matrix Chambers. Sam has recently written the book on law and religion. And we also will be joined by another very good friend of mine, Sean Esprit. Sean tells me he's en route from Nottingham, so he's on a train at the moment. Sean is a criminal practitioner and somebody who has over the last 20 years practiced children's law and public law in relation to children who have been abused and so on. So we should be directing some questions towards them. But let me begin by asking Dilowar Khan from the East London Mosque, the interaction they've had with Tower Hamlets and the people who have articulated the guidance from LBTH, and what kind of questions they raised and what answers they've got from the local borough. Brother Dilowar, excuse me.
Sorry. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. My dear brothers and sisters and participants of today's webinar, first of all, thank you very much for everyone taking your time and participating in this very important issue. As Brother Mizan said that he wants me to share the interaction we had with the Tower Hamlets. We need to go back to 2019 when this issue was raised to us by many parents, saying that they are concerned about the curriculum, the RSE curriculum, they are not comfortable with that. So what I did, I found out who the lead officer is and found out it was Kate Smith. She's the lead officer who is leading on drafting the policy for the schools from the council. So I wrote to her saying that we've been approached by many parents. We'd like to hear from you. What are you doing? Are you taking into concern the parents' concern and in your advice to the schools? So she replied and she came back and she's accepted my invitation for a meeting. So I invited some of our community people in this meeting as well. Sister Sufia was there. There were some other, I'm not sure whether Sheikh Shams was there and some other people we invited to this meeting. And she basically told us how she has consulted people and how they're going about it. And she requested us that if we can organize some more meetings for her, then she will be happy to listen to the parents and understand what their concerns are. So Sister Sufia actually took the lead and she organized a couple of meetings with Kate Smith, and also Sahra from Ashaadibi Center also organized a meeting with her, and a lot of people participated in this meeting. She also told us that there is a steering committee, and she invited myself and Sister Sufia to participate in that one. I think Sheikh Qazi Ashiq was part of it. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that later on, which was dismantled. Anyway, so we did organize a number of meetings, but unfortunately what we found out that the concerns that were raised in the meetings to Kate Smith, they were not properly communicated, or it wasn't taken on board. In fact, we heard that it was the opposite happened. It was reported in the head teachers meeting that the Islam Mosque has approved the position of the council. I think that was the head teachers, it was their understanding. From the office, from Kate Smith and others. We were also informed that in a number of schools in parents' meeting, it was said that the Islam Mosque is happy with the council's position. Then we wrote to the mayor saying this is not the case. We are not approving your your position on RSE. And then we wrote to our chairman, actually wrote to every single head teacher explaining our position, that we don't agree with the council, what they're doing. And then we formed the Muslim Education Committee, and Sheikh Shams was the convener for that. We got a number of stakeholders on board, and we organized a number of public meetings to educate, to inform our parents what's happening and how we can go about doing things. And on 15th of March, just before the lockdown, in 2020, there was a public meeting in LMC. I think around 300 people participated in that meeting. And then the lockdown happened, and also the things where this issue was postponed as well. So we didn't really do anything. A lot of us, everyone was busy with other issues, especially the lockdown. And then we resumed the conversation again in December. The council also requested us, saying that they would like us to organize a couple of more parents' meetings so that they can explain to them what their advice is saying. But we said no, before we organize the meeting, we'd like to meet with the mayor and the relevant councillors and the officers, and we'd like to know what exactly that you have done and what exactly you've communicated. So we had a couple of meetings with the mayor and Councillor Danny Hassel and Kate Smith, and we explained our position and reiterated what the parents' concerns are. It seemed the mayor was trying to understand what the concerns were, but unfortunately, he hasn't. They haven't changed their position. We asked them to change the advice, and revise the advice, and then send it to the schools. I think you'll get the more details about what exactly we asked for. So, and then we actually wrote to the mayor exactly pointing out exactly what the demands or the requests of the Muslim community are, especially the Muslim parents. And point by point, we wrote to the mayor, and it took about 2 months to reply, unfortunately. The reply only came yesterday. And basically, it's just, I've read through the replies. They're still holding their gun. They haven't changed anything since our intervention, unfortunately. So there's something tonight we need to also discuss how we can go forward in dealing with this very important issue, especially for the parents in Tower Hamlets. So inshallah, our other guests will explain to you, what exactly the demands that our parents are making and how we can go about, putting more pressure on the council so that they take into account our views and our wishes. So thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you very much, Brother Dilowar. Sheikh Ashiq, you've been mentioned a bit here. Whilst I move on to Sheikh Ashiq, may I also say this? If you have any questions, there is a Q&A box there. We would ask you to write your questions down, please. I know Sam is here. I did see Sean, but he's phased out again. So hopefully we're hoping Sean to come back at some point. I see we have over 300 participants at the moment. I would ask anyone who's got questions, please, to write those questions down as they have it. Brother Noor will help me in reading out some of the questions or directing those questions. But if I can move on to Sheikh Ashiq and ask, what concerns did you raise with LBTH, and what were the answers? And Sheikh Ashiq, if I can ask you to be succinct, please. We have a number of speakers. Thank you.
Of course, I will be. Good evening again. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My involvement with the Tower Hamlets Council and the the Department of Education and etc. was back in 2009, when one of our colleagues at Darul Ummah informed me that there was actually that the borough was planning to put together a steering group or a steering team to deliver the RSE. So I thought this is a very good idea to get involved and to sort of guide the borough into ensuring that, since a large population, about 50% of the Tower Hamlets residents are Muslims, that we can make the delivery of this RSE relevant, not relevant, sort of make it more sensitive, okay, and takes into consideration to the sensitivities that Muslim communities may have. And so I got involved, and I was there in the head office in the Mulberry, what's this, Mulberry Square, in the head office of Town, that's Mulberry, in Town, that's head office. And from the very beginning, one of the things that we kept on saying, and we said throughout, is that RSE as a subject is good. By and large, we have no problem with RSE as a subject. It speaks about a lot of good things, about friendship, about health and safety. It speaks about how to build relationships with your parents and how to maintain them, respect for others, online safety. And these are things which are very much in line with, coherent with what we all believe in as parents, as people of the society, of Tower Hamlets. But then some of the things that were suggested could have been suggested better. So, for example, naming of the body parts with their actual names from an early age of, say, for example, year 1, year 2. This is something that I thought this will be questionable, and parents would have an issue with that. If the aim is to equip children with the right language to be able to report any sort of offenses or any abuse, then there are other ways. We have the system, the PANTS program by the RSPCA, I believe, right? And so this is a very good way of informing, to say that what's below my garments, what's below my pants is my area, no one should be able to touch, and etc., or speak about. There are other ways around it. That is the point. And that's what we suggested, that maybe we can deliver what we're trying to deliver, which is safety and health and safety, and with the language and with the tools to be able to deal with the problems that the RSE aims to deal with, but do it in a way that's faith sensitive to faith communities and etc. And that's because the DFE guidance is actually, that's exactly what it says. Just like sexuality and gender and stuff is from the protected characteristics, so is a faith, and it's very, very clear in the guidance from the Department for Education that RSE should be delivered in a way that's faith sensitive and age appropriate. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Initially, we were given the impression that notes were being taken as to what we were saying, and then that steering group that was set up was dismantled. And all of a sudden, we were informed that all of the progress that we'd made so far, all of the input, all of the meetings that we sat in, had sort of just dismantled, and the name was changed. It was now called the Stakeholders something reference group or something, and all of the advice that we gave was completely discarded and ignored. And then we had a policy in Tower Hamlets which was sent from the council, which was not reflecting any of the things that we said. It was not age appropriate in our opinion. It was not sensitive towards our aspects of our faith or our culture. And that's where the problems sort of started rising. And then we tried to sort of request that they be amended, adjusted, but that wasn't the case. It didn't happen. The London Borough of Tower Hamlets, they pursued, and they sent out the policy as if it was completely sort of, it was completely fine. And they gave the impression that the Istana Masjid, the Istana Mosque, and Ashaadibi and others who organized the public meetings were actually by them accepting or allowing for the meetings to take place, they gave the impression as though that all of these parents that came were happy with the policy or happy with their suggestions, which wasn't the case. Parents came to ask questions, to understand, to challenge a lot of the times, not necessarily to say that they agree with it. And so there was misrepresentation. There was a level of, sort of leading on false promises, you can say. And then in the end, we're now, even though the DFE has allowed for the curriculum to be implemented in 2021, a lot of the schools in Tower Hamlets are actually already doing it. And they are under the impression that whatever advice the Tower Hamlets Council has given the policy, that's what they are saying that we must apply this, and we've got to sort of follow that. Whereas, as you soon hear from the legal experts, that this isn't the case. In fact, each school must do its own consultation. But, in summary, to answer Ms. Anbai's question is, my experience with Tower Hamlets Council with this particular topic and in this regard wasn't a positive one. We were led on to believe that our opinions were taken, but really they weren't. They were completely ignored. And when we actually brought up the issues which were problematic for our faith communities, we were once again ignored and completely sort of, no answers were given yet. And today we don't see any of the councillors here as well to answer any of our questions. I'll now pass it back to Ms. Anbai, and then we'll proceed. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Shaykh Ashiq, to answer your question on that respect, I know that Rushnara Ali, the MP for Bethnal Green and Bow, was invited. Afsana Begum, the Limehouse Poplar MP, was invited. Asma Begum, who's the educational lead and under whose portfolio this falls under, was invited. I understand from those who invited her, she used the Purda excuse. I don't see how Purda excuses her from coming to community meetings, but that's the excuse she gave. Mayor John Biggs was invited. He too is unable to attend to hear what the local community has to say and the concerns they have. So those who we empowered, we, the local residents of Tower Hamlets, have empowered, they have today turned down the offer to come and tell us their views or even hear the local voters. I will pass now on to Sister Sufia Alam. Sufia is the manager of Maryam Center, where actually Sufia, you actually hold the light, because it's our mothers and our wives and our sisters who take the children to school, and it is they who engage and interact with schools. And I know you've been involved in the various meetings with Kate Smith. So Sufia, if you can tell us your experience and what have the mothers and sisters, the parents, have said to you.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, panelists. Thank you everyone for joining. Indeed, I have been part of this journey, and it's been a very difficult one. In my 30 years almost of community organising and community development of especially women's work, I've not been this much inundated by a certain concern. And as the Maryam Centre manager for the last 2 years, this has been a big topic. Parents have really been concerned about this issue because they feel quite powerless. My work has been about empowering women, giving them the voice, to engage. We've done so much progress in terms of getting school governors, representation of women in school governors, and yet we're stepping back because women are feeling powerless. Why? Because they're not being heard. And in this particular subject, there is a cultural sensitivity, there is a religious kind of right that parents feel, and being in a borough where we've had a brilliant relationship, I am disappointed. I know it is a difficult time, in terms of politics, but I am disappointed that our politicians are not here to hear the community. And I know there's been lots of conversations, but what I've been hearing from mothers and parents and concerned parents, that they feel powerless because they can't make that decision what to teach and what not to teach, and what age and what not to age, and to teach, and at what age. So even for myself, I have made it my mission to read the DfE guidance, and some of it didn't make sense. And even having this conversation with Kate Smith, at one stage we had to close or we had to cancel one of the sessions because I don't think I could have managed the crowd. And it was because people were raged because their questions were not answered. The things that the very religious values that this borough normally takes into account. And we've had a brilliant relationship in terms of accommodating that. But in this subject, it was kind of contradicted by safeguarding and equality law, which really, disempowered women, because there were women who was parents that were coming to me and saying, I want to speak to my head teachers. I don't want to ruin this relationship, but I'm also concerned that they're going to be reporting us to prevent and being labelled as extremists. But I just want to know my rights to teach my child on, especially something that is very close to our religious values in terms of modesty. And even for me, my kids have grown up, but I feel, naming body parts and little 5-year-olds going around naming explicit body parts is not a progressive way, and it's nothing to do with safety. And I work with safeguarding children and those bodies, and it really baffled me as well. So I really, we was really concerned about this, and I think, the meeting with the mayor, I'm hoping that it will be positive in the coming weeks, and he will listen to our concerns. And more so, finally, I just want to add that I'm also a member of the tension monitoring group in Tower Hamlets, and this is the very tension that we talk about with, and I reported it to one of the officers that we don't want a Birmingham situation in Tower Hamlets. We've come such a long way, and in these 2 years, Brother Dilowar and these panel members have tirelessly worked to come up with guidance with legal support that at least we could work something out. We are a multicultural society, a community, and we're tolerant, and we all work side by side, but it's little values that need to be taken into consideration. And I think we need to be, as parents, we want to get mothers and parents to get involved in with their school, have those conversations and explain to the head teachers, and we can support you through the various panel members here. So with that, Brother Mizan, I'll pass it on to you, and if there's any questions at the end. I think I've covered most of the things, but I think, I'm really disappointed that we can't work this one out.
Sister Sufia, I'm grateful for that. I'm going to move on to Sheikh Abdul Qayum next, but before I do, let me just explain to some of our participants. I think the issue here, and forgive me, call a spade, what the suggestions are by the local authority, which the schools are accepting, are the following: that at the age of 5 or first year at school, young children as young as 5 will be able to name their body parts, penis, vagina, labia, anus, that sort of thing, as explicitly as I have just said it right now. And I apologize. I'm a grown man with grown children, and I feel embarrassed saying it in front of you. But these are the things that 5-year-olds are being taught or are looking to be taught. And with that, I'm going to ask Sheikh Abdul Qayum to come and tell us. Sheikh Abdul Qayum, if you can say it in both Bangla and English, why you feel religiously, and because remember, religion is a protected right, and so why religiously you believe that is eroding the faith Muslims hold, and why you feel that is eroding the Islamic culture. So with that, can I ask Sheikh Abdul Qayum to say a few words, please? Sheikh Abdul Qayum, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. Thank you, Brother Mizan, and all other guests and our brothers and sisters who joined this important event this evening. We are very disappointed that none of the authorities from the local council attended. It's a really big shame, and they let us down. That is really upsetting for the whole community. As you know, as a big mosque in the borough, we are, receiving the thousands, hundreds and thousands of the calls, from the parents from the beginning of this journey of this SRE issue, and they are turning to the mosque what we can do for them. And that's why the history of this journey, as Brother Dilowar, Sister Sufia, Imam Ashiqur, all of them are referring to. And it seems nothing was listened by the policy makers in the council. We are very disappointed. We are very upset by this attitude of non-cooperation with the community which have elected them. I will say that very children of, as Brother Mizan, you refer to 5 years old, they are going from the families who are practicing Muslim, followed by Islamic guidance. When a child goes to the school in very first year and hear this kind of words and body parts, the name of the body parts, which I don't want to repeat of mentioning this, is a very shocking. If you shock the young one in the classroom, how you what you expect from them to be opening their mind to learn something from the school. So this cultural shock to them, and if it was a DFE's guidance, the council could say, yes, we have no choice. But how you, while DFE very clearly given this statutory guidance and given this right to the parents' cultural background and to consult with them, you are not doing anything of this. So this is one way without listening and ignoring whole communities, all this cry and demand. This is absolutely not acceptable by the community. Let us, I don't repeat what has been said. I say a few words in Bangla for our many of the brothers participant, the parents who are very concerned. আমরা আপনারা জানেন যে অনেকগুলো মিটিং আজকে প্রায় 2 বছর ধরে চলছে এসআরই এই বিষয় নিয়ে। আপনারা জানেন যে আমাদের বারাতে ইসলামিক মসজিদে দারুল উম্মাহ এবং অন্যান্য আশাদিবি সেন্টার থেকে শুরু করে সবাই মিলে আমরা কাজ করছি। কাউন্সিলকে আমরা বিভিন্ন পর্যায়ে মিটিং এ নিয়ে এসেছি। তারা এসে ইসলামিক মসজিদে আপনাদেরকে অনেক প্রায় 500 থেকে বা 1000-এর মতো যারা অডিয়েন্স ছিলেন সবার সঙ্গে তারা কনসালটেশন করলো। আপনারা কি বললেন? আসে রিপোর্টটা পুরো উল্টো দেওয়া হয়ে গেল যে হ্যাঁ কনসালটেশন করা হয়ে গেছে, ইসলামিক মসজিদে হ্যাপি আছে, সমস্ত মানে অসত্য কথা দিয়ে এভাবে করে তারা এটা রিপোর্ট পেশ করেছে। এবং গভর্নমেন্ট যেখানে ডিএফই যেখানে অর্থাৎ শিক্ষা মন্ত্রণালয় যেখানে এটা কম্পালসারি করছে না, অথবা কি বলা যায় কম্পালসারি করলেও সেখানে তারা সুযোগ রাখছে যে স্কুল যখন এটাকে কার্যকরী করবে, ইমপ্লিমেন্ট করবে, তখন তারা প্যারেন্টদের সঙ্গে কনসালটেশন করবে, যে কনসালটেশনটা রিয়েল কনসালটেশন, যেটা তাদেরকে কথা বলার সুযোগ দিবে, শুনবে এবং তাদের কালচারাল সেন্সিটিভিটি, তাদের রিলিজিয়াস রাইট, এগুলোকে কোনোটাই তারা ইগনোর করবে না। কিভাবে তারা অ্যাকোমোডেট করবে এবং ডিএফ এর গাইডেন্সে এই সুযোগটা আছে, কিন্তু আমাদের কাউন্সিল এই সুযোগটাকে সরিয়ে দেবে এবং স্কুলগুলো ডিএফ এর গাইডলাইনের বাইরে গিয়ে কাউন্সিলের পলিসিকে তারা এক্সিকিউট করছে এবং বলে দিচ্ছে মনে হয় যেন what council said almost as if it is mandatory. This is a big kind of lie here, I could say very clear. That's not true. This policy of Tower Hamlets Council has no legal standing. Still, DFE, guideline is the main one where we can work with the, school should work with the parents, listen to their concern, and looking at their all this cultural and religious background and sensitivity. And overall, our main goal is what? Our main goal is to educate our children. To educate the children, we need to create an environment where children, parents, all stakeholders are positive, having some kind of relationship, not this relationship with tension. As Sister Sufia was referring to that. I know very surely many of the parents are very having serious tension, as if they would like to withdraw the children's education from the school. So how we avoid this situation? We should have serious kind of dialogue again with the council, and school must be listening to the parents opinion and their cultural background and age issue. All this should be in consideration according to the DFE's line. Nothing adding by the council or school is not implementing this council's policy without having proper consultation and consideration to the parents, religion, guideline, religions and culture, all other things. We know that to give a right to a particular group, you should not deny the right of the other people. That is we need to make some kind of balance here. It is one way, ignoring huge number of people's all this right and giving a particular group only all right. It's not according to the law. Neither it is according to the the community and the society. We should have some kind of balance and negotiation, and keeping all stakeholders are agreeing with the very kind of agreement that we are all happy, satisfied, and willing to cooperate with each other, not bullying others and ignoring others. That is my very clear message. আমি আশা করছি আপনারা বুঝতে পেরেছেন যে আমাদের রাইট গুলোকে যেভাবে ডিএফই দিয়েছে সেগুলোকে সবগুলোকে ইগনোর করা হয়েছে। আমরা এটা মানতে পারি না। আমাদেরকে স্কুলের সঙ্গে কথা বলার সময় আমাদেরকে বলতে হবে যে না, কাউন্সিলের যে দিছে তোমাদেরকে এটা আমরা মানতে বাধ্য না। আমরা ডিএফ এর গাইডলাইনে আমাদের এখনো রাইট আছে, আমাদের সঙ্গে তোমরা কনসালটেশন করতে হবে, কি পড়াবা আমরা দেখতে চাই, আমাদেরকে তোমরা দেখাবা, এবং যেখানে যেখানে আমরা বলবো এটা অবজেকশন আছে আমাদের ধর্মে, আমাদের ইসলামী, আমাদের কালচারে, এটাকে তোমরা পড়াতে পারবে না এবং আমাদেরকে ইগনোর করে তোমরা এটা চাপিয়ে দিতে পারবে না। আমাদের রাইট আছে, আমাদের রাইটকে তোমরা ডিনাই করতে পারবে না। আমরা মজবুত হয়ে এই কথাগুলো বলতে হবে। আনফরচুনেটলি আমরা যদি ফিজিক্যালি বসতে পারতাম, আমরা যদি আরো লকডাউন সিচুয়েশন না থাকতো, তাহলে আমরা আরো খোলাখুলি কথা বলতে পারতাম। মা বোনেরা, ভাই প্যারেন্টসরা, আপনারা দুর্বল হয়ে যাবেন না। স্কুল আপনাদেরকে জোর করে চাপিয়ে দিতে পারে না। এখানে আমাদেরকে ডিএফ এর গাইডলাইন আমাদের পক্ষে আছে, অন্তত পক্ষে আমাদের কথা বলার মতো, সেটা আমরা যেন খুব দুর্বল না হয়ে যাই। ইনশাআল্লাহ যদি লকডাউন কিছু ওভার হয়, আমরা প্রয়োজন বোধে আরো কিছু মিটিং করে আপনাদের সঙ্গে ফিজিক্যালি, এবং আমাদের যে গ্রুপগুলো কাজ করতেছে, অবশ্যই ব্রাদার নূর উইল বি টকিং অ্যাবাউট দিস প্যারেন্টস যে বডি আছে, আপনারা সেখানে সবাই যোগাযোগ করবেন, সহযোগিতা করবেন। তাহলে আপনারা বুঝবেন যে কিভাবে আপনারা কথা বলতে পারবেন স্কুলের সঙ্গে, আপনাদের রাইটকে কিভাবে আদায় করতে পারবেন। আপনাদেরকে একটা জিনিস চাপিয়ে দিবে আর আমরা ভয়ে চুপসে যাব, এমন যেন না হয়। আল্লাহ তাআলা আমাদেরকে তৌফিক দান করুন, আমাদের ছেলে মেয়েদেরকে আমরা সঠিক শিক্ষার মধ্যে রাখতে পারি, এবং আমাদের যে হায়া, আমাদের যে শাইনেস ইজ ভেরি পার্ট অফ আওয়ার দিন। It is taken away by this kind of imposing all these unnecessary issues. We have to be very clear about this, what is our right and how we go about this. I don't think this meeting is giving everything today. Brother Noor and others probably will be giving us some further actions. We need to be very aware and participating all these good kind of initiatives. Thank you, Jazakumullah khairan, for giving me time.
Thank you, Sheikh Abdul Qayum. I'm going to just say, just on the back of what Sheikh has said, and you've heard, he too feels somewhat embarrassed to name the body parts. You've got to understand, your 5- and 6-year-old are going to come home at some point and ask you about these terms. Whether you feel you're comfortable to answer those questions is one for parents. There are a number of questions that have been raised. I'm going to quickly move to Sheikh Shams Adduha, if I can see him somewhere. There he is. Sheikh Shams, if you could just give us a snippet of the various meetings you've had. And I'm realizing the time, and this is why I'm going to ask everybody from here on in to be very quick on this, because there are a number of questions that have been prompted to us. Sheikh Shams, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, guests. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. I'm going to be very, very mindful and wary of the fact that my big brother Mizan is standing over my shoulders and he's going to absolutely shoot me down if I go over time. So I've noted some points down. I'm going to try not to repeat what others have said. I think a lot of points have been made by my colleagues very clearly. I just want to try to highlight a few things that I think are important for parents to hear. We have almost 400 people here. Most will be concerned parents and people of Tower Hamlets and beyond. I just saw a message from a student of mine up in Scotland who said, this is for Tower Hamlets people. But I just, for those of you who are not from Tower Hamlets, this issue is unfolding across the country, pretty much wherever there is a liberal council in place, whether it's Labour or, I mean, we're talking Labour. I'm sorry to make it about a party issue, but that is what's happening. In inner city boroughs, this is the kind of line that's being taken. We have a similar situation in places like Kirklees and so on, where we recently just had that school row, the Batley school row. So anyway, so first and foremost, the DFE has handed this issue down to schools. DFE has a fairly broad set of guidelines on this issue and has left it to schools to consult parents and decide with them. Tower Hamlets Council has sort of provided a degree of protection to schools by taking the onus on themselves to step in and give some guidance to schools, as if to say schools have to listen to what we are saying. That is not what the government guidance says. That's not what the law says. Schools are supposed to consult parents and decide for themselves. Interestingly, when we speak to schools, we're told we have to do as the borough says. I want everybody to understand this clearly. We're told we have to do as the borough says. When we challenge the council, as in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, when we challenge the council says it's down to the schools. So basically, what is going on, right? So, but as far as the law is concerned, it's down to schools and their consultation with parents. And what I'm trying to say to the 400 or so people here is, it comes down to you at the end of the day. And I'll keep repeating this, inshallah. Secondly, I don't know why we have to say this, but I feel like I must, right? And that is that as the Muslim community, myself as a community leader and Imam, right, a person who's responsible for religious guidance, we don't have a problem with what are now the controversial elements of RSE, the LGBT teaching parts, the naming of the private organs and so on and so forth. We don't have a problem with teaching these things to children in principle, right? Our concerns are with age appropriateness. It's to do with at what age are children being exposed to these things, right? Every single parent will teach their children about private parts, about their private organs. Okay, many people out there will be like, oh, Muslims are not going to teach their children about LGBT people, right? Okay, let's put that issue aside, right? Well, our children are going to know about their sexual organs and their private organs, right? They are. So we can't possibly have a problem with that in principle. The issue is about age appropriateness. What I would like to assert again is it's the same with the LGBT issue. We know where we are. I'm not in Bangladesh or Saudi Arabia. This is Britain, right? And we're all citizens of this country. And the LGBT issue isn't new. It hasn't just dawned on us today that there are LGBT people around. You know, we may have neighbors and community members who are LGBT. Our children are being taught by teachers who are from the LGBT community. That's not the issue. The issue is it appropriate for me to be put into a position as a Muslim whose religion does have a position on this, for my hand to be forced to have this conversation with my 5-year-old? And is it appropriate for the school to be having that conversation with my child and taking this out of my hands? This is the issue. It's a question of age appropriateness, and that legally the government does not require schools to have this conversation at the age of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. But at some point in primary school, according to perhaps one interpretation, although there is the opinion that it's not required at all in primary school. So this is the thing that we have to basically clarify. And we keep having to put this disclaimer forward, of course, because the basic assumption is, oh, Muslims just want to impose Islam on the rest of society. It's just not the case, right? Right. We also, and it's not just about these two issues, and you know, and there's also questions about pedagogy. I just want to put this out there, right? Schools do not, on these issues, schools cannot claim to know best, because these are policies that have only just been implemented. How can you possibly know what's best in these issues, right? So I think parents we should be able to say, hang on a second, we'd like to have a say on this, right? How can you possibly know what's best on a new issue, on a new policy decision, right? How can you possibly know what is the best way to teach about private parts, and what is the best way to present something that is to a child of faith that is deeply troublesome from their faith background, that can be deeply problematic. It can put them in a position where they're confused, or it puts their parents in a. How can you possibly know that pedagogically you know exactly what is the right way to do this? You can't. There has to be consultation, there has to be dialogue, there has to be compromise. The next point I want to make is just a little point about demographics, just to show that we're not just kind of screaming and shouting in Tower Hamlets for no reason, right? Demographically speaking, 65% of school-aged children on average in Tower Hamlets are Muslim, right? In many of our Tower Hamlet schools, like the school that all 3 of my children, 2 have attended and 1 remains, who's 3 who will attend, we're talking about 80-90% representation of Muslim children. How can these schools not take on board the Muslim position when, forget the possibility of children from LGBT families, the possibility of non-Muslim, the non-Muslim demographic in these schools is so tiny. How can the parents' concerns not be taken into consideration? Surely there has to be a school by school varied policy. On what basis is Tower Hamlets Council taking a blanket position on this for every single school in Tower Hamlets? This makes absolutely zero sense, right? And we can't even approach them on this. I mean, our councillors, many from the community, by the way, are playing no role in this, and they won't even attend these types of events. Yeah, of course they have their reasons, and we'll acknowledge that. But parents, you're voting these people in. you're voting them. You're going to be going knocking on each other's door and saying, oh, please vote for so-and-so because she's from this village back home, etc., etc. Do please consider asking them about this issue, right? Another point is parents are concerned they cannot speak up because they will get labeled as homophobic. I think Sister Sufia mentioned this. This is a critical issue. Essentially, what's happening is, and I'm sorry if this sounds a bit presumptive of me, but I've seen enough evidence of this. There is a kind of hedging of bets, right? This is a controversial issue. Let's make decisions that the Muslim community actually doesn't accept. However, voices are going to be muted on this issue because everybody's worried about being politically incorrect, right? And coming across as homophobic. And a lot of parents have directly voiced this concern to us. I'm sorry, parents, you have to speak up. As difficult as it is, you have to speak up because we are being told as community leaders, it's down to the parents. If you're silent, these policies are going to go ahead and be implemented. In fact, policies are being drafted as we speak. Some of them are going to be implemented after Easter. We have to step in and do something about it. You have to go and speak to your schools. The legal issue. The many parents, actually, I want to come to this, and I know I need to wrap up, Ms. Anbay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This issue represents a complete breakdown of trust between Tower Hamlets Council, the community, as well as a breakdown of trust between schools and between parents. I just want to put that out there. This is a serious issue. The council and schools need to take this seriously. This is a breakdown of trust, perhaps even a breach of trust, right? And finally, when parents go to schools, they're being told the following. Number one, so the school and the council, their position is, our position is legally sound. This is the legal issue. Our position is legally sound. So parents are being pushed, there's this pushback against parents saying, well, we've taken legal advice on this. This is how it has to be. There's nothing that can be done. Or at least that's the impression parents are walking away from. Well, we can tell you in this public meeting, and my colleagues will say further, that the council's legal advice is a position, right? We have also taken advice, and there is another position, right? And it's quite clear, in fact, just read the government guidance. So please be confident about this. Number two, we're required to consult. We're not required to listen. I mean, what a terrible thing to say, but parents, and we are being told this. We're required to consult. We're not required to listen. So what about the demographics I just mentioned? And what is the point of the consultation then? Right. So number three, the Tower Hamlets Council's position is to safeguard children, including children from LGBT families. First of all,
Sheikh Shams, I'm going to ask you to wrap up very quickly,
yes,
please.
I'm done. There's two more points, Ms. Anbay, and I'm done, right? First of all, we don't buy it. The safeguarding argument doesn't make sense. We can't, Kate Smith, the mayor, we've sat with them face to face and they can't convince us. They can't even make a clear, cogent argument about how this is a safeguarding issue. I said to both of them in a face-to-face meeting, can you please explain to me what threat does my 5-year-old son pose to children from LGBT families? Are you trying to say that my 5-year-old, my 6-year-old, my 7-year-old is a threat and that you have to safeguard these children if they happen to be in their school from my 5-year-old? My 5-year-old is going to be homophobic. My 6-year-old is going to be homophobic. I mean, what exactly is the assumption at play here? Can you see the problem, brothers and sisters, right? We have to challenge this kind of nonsense, right? So that's this, this safeguarding issue. And what about the safeguarding of the rights of Muslim parents and Muslim children? Are they just going to be trampled on? So there's a balance and there's a compromise that has to be arrived at. That's all we're asking for. And finally, the schools and the council's position often, the response often is that we have listened to parents and have raised the age to key stage 2. I just want to say this because I know we're saying age 5 a lot here. The schools that I have met, so I've gone and met some head teachers. They've said, you know what, the council is recommending that we start at age 5 at key stage 1, but you know what, that's untenable. But we're gonna implement it from age 7, from key stage 2. And my response is, well, we don't accept that. Why do you need to? Why does it have to be from key stage 2? Why not higher? Why can't we start having an open conversation about age appropriateness, and at least I can present my arguments for why I think it should be perhaps at age 10, right? Why not? Well, first of all, as a parent, that's when I feel I can have a proper conversation with my child about these issues. How am I supposed to have these conversations with them at the age of 7? Right? I mean, I'm a parent. I know what a 7-year-old can and can't understand and how much confusion these issues will cause. So we have to push back against all of these, honestly, nonsensical arguments. This is what the comeback is when we challenge them. You can't just accept it. You can't. Okay, brothers and sisters. So anyway, I hope I didn't repeat too much of what's already being said. Jazakumullah khairan. Mizan Bhai, I do apologize if I've taken up extra time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sheikh Shams. You've made a number of points which I think needs to be drilled in, and one of those is that the Muslim community, let me rephrase that, parents of every faith in East London are walking in with eyes closed until they hear. And I've seen some of the text messages or some of the questions, and one of them from a sister who says, my young child came in and said, mother, at school they showed me a picture of a woman and her private parts, and it made her sick. It made her physically vomit. Before I go on, and can I just ask the rest of the panelists, we've got Sean here at last. Sean has made it from Nottingham somewhere, and Sam is here as well. All the legal points, we can address it with both Sean and Sam. And as I've mentioned before, Sam is a Silk, a Queen's Counsel, and Sean is a practicing member of the bar, doing both prosecution and defense. But before we get there, our host today, and I've missed him out for a lot, from Ashaadibi, brother Sheikh Arshe. He is from the Somali community. A lot of this has been spoken about the Bengali community, but Sheikh Ahmed, I'm sure you see other communities and you see other parents. What has been your experience and what has been the experience of Ashaadibi? Can I just ask you to briefly explain here?
Jazakallah khair, brother and Sam. Basically, we had similar experience in like the other mosques and other communities. And I think it was like a year ago, we received an email from the Tower Hamlets Council when the framework was introduced by the government, and they asked us to arrange a meeting with the Somali parents. Unfortunately, we were able to do this on last January 2020 before the coronavirus started. And that meeting was between the Somali parents and the head of the Health Lives, Kate Smith, as you guys mentioned before, in order for the parents to have face-to-face consultation and raise some of their concerns. We had over 2,000 parents attended the meeting. But unfortunately, Kate, she read out the guidelines, which was parents already knew and they were aware of it. But unfortunately, what the parents wanted was consultation. They wanted to have a discussion, open discussion about the issue and ask some of the questions. But unfortunately, the feedback we got from the parents, they were really frustrated how genuine important questions from the parents were not answered, which added more frustration and confusion to the situation, which already some of the brothers mentioned and sisters. Furthermore, parents were expecting an open discussion, but any questions or attempt to make any suggestions was rejected by her. Also, parents are concerned with the information that we're receiving from the parents, especially the Somali community, with the lack of consultation regarding the RSE and how consultation is being conducted in the Tower Hamlets schools. This was mentioned by some of the brothers as well. So this is a big issue that when the parents, they go to the school, they're being told this is from the council. And when they go to the council, it's the opposite and vice versa. They're telling this is from the schools. It's up to the schools to basically implement these rules. But what the parents, they want to know is whether they're allowed to have a say. They want to have a say. They want to say something about this. They want to say whether this is age appropriate, whether this is a religious views appropriate, whether they're allowed to teach their children. And some of the brothers even mentioned, how are you supposed to even address these issues to the children as young as 5? You know, see, this is even going to cause more issues than going to do any good. Because when you teach children as young as 5 and 7 and 8, when they hear these things and these names that we mentioned, I don't even want to say it, They want to research this. They want to go to the internet and research this. So what good are you bringing to these children? You're supposed to be safeguarding the children. You're supposed to be protecting them, but you're actually causing, you're exposing them to more harm at that age. So the parents want to know whether they're entitled for consultation prior to implementation of the RSE framework. As some of the brothers already mentioned, that they are allowed to have a say and they should have a consultation with their schools. And also, this was, I think, has been mentioned before, but to make one thing clear, that parents have no problem with the DFE framework, which was set by the government. They feel that, but the following must be taken into consideration. Number one, the document published by the Tower Hamlets RSE framework and policy advice has no legal standing. The parents need to understand this. The LBTH framework, which was the position of the Tower Hamlets Council, has no legal standing. And the schools also have statutory and duty to consult with parents as they are an important stakeholder before introducing any policy. The schools also must take into consideration age, religious background of all peoples to ensure their teaching is appropriate. And all schools are required to write their own policy regarding RSE curriculum in accordance with the law and DFE guidelines. So I just want to say what I said basically in Somali, so the parents from the Somali community can also understand, inshallah. Yeah, shirka maanta wuxuu ku saabsan yahay wada garanaysaan hawshii baryahan jirtay ee sharciga jinsiyadka ciyaalka loo dhigayay iskuullada lagu dhigayay. So waxyaabaha la soo qabtay waxaa ka mid ah in lala kulmay sida gabadha u shaqaysa Kate Smith iyo maayirka xaafadda, labadaba lala kulmay, arrintan loo bandhigay. Waxaa kale oo la soo ogaaday sharciga muxuu inoo ogol yahay inaan ka hadalno, maxaynu inagu as a parent inaan iskuulka tagno oo aan raise garino pointyadan maxaa laynooga ogol yahay. Taana waa sharcigu qoraya isagoo Soomaaliyana insha Allah waa la idin soo diray qofka u baahan una inoo qoran yahay sharcigaas waa la soo ogaaday, garyaqaanadiina way joogaan. Maanta wax kale inala jooga culimadii sida Abdul Qayum, jazakallahu khairan, culimo badan bay inala joogta, garyaqaano, masaajido badan baa jooga from the Somali community, Bengali community and other communities as well. And iyo dad badan oo aad ugu dhuun daloola arrinta RSE oo ah sharciga jinsiyadka iyo ciyaalka sida waxa loo barayo markay gaaraan qaan gaaraan iyo waxaas, iyo dadka LGBT-ga ee dadkeena la degan. Waxaan rajaynayaa in aad dhageysanaysaan waxyaabaha aan soo jeedinay sida dadka culimada ay ka hadleen iyo waxa aan soo jeedinayba. Ciddii su'aal haysana insha Allah ha weydiiyaan marka su'aalaha la soo gaaro. Waa mahadsantihiin. Jazakumullahu khairan. Thank you, brother Masin. Inshallah, you can take over.
Thank you, Brother Ahmed. Before I go to the lawyers, and I thank them for giving a lot of their time in advance, I'm going to ask Brother Noor, who has had a lot of interaction with the parents because he runs the Tower Hamlets Parents Organization, and I'm told there are about 1,000, if not more, parents who consult him, and he gets the brunt of all this. If I could ask him to share very succinctly, and if I can just say the legal points we will address with Sean and Sam, but Brother Noor, what is it that your association have been getting, and what is it that parents have been saying to you? You know, what is the problem? Because from everything we've seen, and Brother Ahmed and Brother Shaykh Shams have explained, that DFE guidance, and as we've said at the very outset, the LMC and the others have obtained a legal opinion from a Queen's Council who says, look, the LBTH guidance is just a guidance, it is not mandatory. What is mandatory is the schools to consult parents. That is the part that is mandatory. What is it that you've been hearing on that front? If I can come back to you, go to you, Brother Noor.
I'll try to be as quick as possible. I know time is running out, but there's quite a lot of points that needs addressing. I think first and foremost, I think the overarching thing that needs to be taken into consideration is parents are the primary educators of children. And that's where all of this is actually stemming from. The DFE guidance has been set out, and within that, Obviously, even in that process, there are a number of concerns within that. However, the DFE have left the guidance relatively broad that gives scope for schools to accommodate different communities and where the children come from different faith backgrounds as well. But what we're seeing in Tower Hamlets, where the predominant majority of pupils in schools tend to be from the Muslim community. So on average, about 63% is the average across Tower Hamlets that the pupils are from Muslim. There are some schools where you're going to 90% and more. It seems very strange, the approach that the schools are taking in regards to the implementation of the RSE. Now, obviously, we mentioned, and I just need to highlight again, because I've seen a lot of questions coming in, the areas of concern. Generally speaking, RSE in itself, the curriculum is very much it's an okay curriculum. You know, I think the vast majority of parents do not have a concern about. They do teach many elements in regards to safety, in regards to relationships and bullying and many other aspects. So these are very actually important aspects that are good for the education. However, there are a few concerning areas, especially for those who are from faith backgrounds, predominantly say Muslim faith as well within the Tower Hamlets. Now, they come down to the age appropriateness of the topics that are being taught, not necessarily the topics in itself. I don't think there's any hiding to say that the community, and I think there's, again, a myth that gets thrown around by those who are, very much calling out anybody who raises these issues as homophobic, or in fact, I look at them as well very much being Islamophobic, because they automatically associate the religion with anything that's said that they deem is against LGBT to be homophobic, and that isn't the case. Now, from these comments are that, and these myths that they spread, that we're trying to deny that people from the LGBT exist. I don't think anybody is denying that. They do exist, and they've existed for thousands of years. And I don't think that is what is being talked about. Rather, they're talking about children and the age that they are being exposed to these things. And it can be very confusing for some young children. And there are many cases where children, even up to, if they're starting from the age of 5, there's some children who are still not fully able to use the toilet on their own. And in schools, yet they'll be talking about certain relationships, which again, they may be not necessarily aware of and confused about. So the point being is it's the age appropriateness of these topics that are being taught. And alongside with that as well is the naming of the sexual organs of the body. And what you see here is that the schools are using 2 points. They're saying an angle of is required in RSE. However, in the RSE guidance, it's not there. Then they're saying it's required from safeguarding. And these are what the parents are saying, the schools are telling them, safeguarding. However, if you come from the aspect of safeguarding, the issue is knowing a name of a body part doesn't prevent you from abuse. What prevents you from abuse is knowing how to be safe about what is it that a child needs to do if anything was to happen to them, if they're in a certain situation. And this can all be done, as Sheikh Ashiq mentioned, the NSPCC have their PANTS program. In fact, I'm very much on the topic of safeguarding. I published 2 books that are for children that talk about the issue of safeguarding. Again, about inappropriate touches and body safety specifically. And so these are all resources that can be used that are, again, addressing the issue of safeguarding without having to even go into the names. Now, naturally, children will know the names of this alongside when they learn about puberty and the scientific names. So no one's denouncing the fact of learning the scientific names is good. It is at the right age. And this is what we're coming to. So, and the other issue of concern is a lot of schools are pushing the age of teaching about puberty at a younger age, where a lot of children are not actually reaching puberty at that age. And so they can stem to be the 3 concerning issues about the teaching of different types of families with children and talking about same-sex families. And then you're talking about the naming of the body parts and puberty. They tend to be the 3 contentious areas. So therefore, what is really, and another point about safeguarding, which is really important, just the current thing that's happening, that all of these reports of children who are now reporting how they have been abused and harassed sexually in schools. And now Ofsted is having to go back and do a search of different schools about the abuse that these children will be facing. Now, if I just logically thinking, do these children who are actually in secondary school, do they not know the names of the sexual body parts? They do. Yeah. However, does this prevent them from being abused? They haven't. They've still been abused. So what is missing in the education is about how they can stay safe themselves. And that's what we should be promoting, not necessarily that. Additionally, the point about naming the body parts are then using the science curriculum. However, if you look for the science curriculum, that is not what is explained by knowledge of the external body parts. And they clearly state it within the science curriculum, you'll see as well. So what ends up happening, there's a trust breakdown between the schools and the parents. And then what happens is the schools then rely on their default at saying that the local authority telling them that they have to do this, but you speak to local authority and they say, no, this is up to the schools. And so this is cat and mouse, and parents feel very lost in this process. And it can get very frustrating for them. And we know as a collective here, from the different organizations that are here, we actually met with the mayor on a couple of occasions, the mayor with Danny Hassel, with Kate Smith. Now Danny Hassel has been replaced by Asma Begum. And we've met with them. And even in those meetings, the mayor himself has said clearly that he agrees that naming of the sexual organs doesn't actually help in the safeguarding approach. So he even agrees logically it doesn't make sense. However, the council still haven't moved or budged on that point. And so it's really important to understand. Like I said, many of these politicians, the mayor, the councillors, and the MPs, Kate Smith, have been invited here, but they haven't turned up. Because there's also a case of, are they hiding away? And that's a question we need to ask. Are they hiding away from public scrutiny on this issue? Because there is it is a highly contentious issue, and the parents do not feel their voices are being heard. Then we move down onto schools. What's actually happening in the school ground? The schools, many of the parents feel, are bulldozing through a policy. Now, in the guidance, it makes it clear that, yes, parents do not have the right to veto. However, parents' views must be taken into consideration. So the school are unable still to demonstrate how they've taken the parents' views into consideration, and the faith background and the age appropriateness. And these things are not being very clear. And the way they've done this is through what we call closed consultations. So they've been having consultation forms online where parents fill it in, and they are closed. So they just say, we will be teaching about this. What year? Year 1 or year 2? They don't even give the option to say latter years, nor do they give the option to even say, I don't want it to be taught, for example. And so these are non-statutory elements. The DfE make it clear on the legal side. I think Sam and Sean will address this. I don't want to go into it now to repeat it again. But these are bits that they close off the consultation. So the consultation doesn't seem to be proper and to be fair. And then in the end, what happens is, if a parent has no choice to select year 1 or year 2, they then select year 2 because they actually maybe want year 6, for example. Then their feedback will come back and they'll say 100% of parents said year 2. And this data is skewed. And so there is a massive breakdown of trust between parents and schools, and between parents and the local authority. And unfortunately, it's brewing a very dangerous cocktail. And it's the last thing that we want. We are trying our best to help support parents and schools in order to have come to a middle ground agreement. There are a few schools. There are some schools that I work with specifically, and there are some schools who are, alhamdulillah, have listened to the parents and come to a middle ground. And that's what we're asking for. Come to a middle ground. You want to make it a win-win situation, not a win-lose in either way, because it won't really benefit the school, nor will it benefit the parents. So that is really the key part that we're trying to kind of push through. That we want to ensure that the consultation is fair, that the views are taken into consideration. And I think in terms of some of the approach, I just need to mention, it's important that parents should be engaging with the schools. They should be speaking to their head teachers, speaking to the relevant individuals of staff, members of staff who are actually sharing this information, and ensuring that the consultations are done and raising these specific questions and then requesting meetings. Yes, you might not meet face to face, you can meet on Zoom, but holding the parents to account and raising these specific points. And it's really important, because if you don't address these points, the schools, unfortunately, they're pushing through on certain policies which you may not be aware of. So really, key thing is we're raising the awareness. Parents go engage with your schools, and thereafter, if the schools still are not following and complying with the legal guidance, we'll hear from our legal advisors, Sam and Sean, in regards to what are the next steps that can possibly be taken. And with that, I'll leave you at that.
Thank you very much. There are some questions that you've posed. And the question really is, do the local authority have a point when it comes to safeguarding and when it comes to naming body parts? If I can stay on that for instance, because let's face it, Sheikh Sham said it beautifully. Actually, and majority of us parents do not object to the DfE guidance, and we know as parents that our children will see same-sex couples outside. We know as parents that our kids will be at some stage knowing the names of their private parts. It is at what stage and at what age we, they get to know those names. The question really is, does naming the body parts, or does knowing the naming body parts prevent abuse? And that's the question. Now, I know I asked Danny Hassel, whether he knows of any cases where prosecution has stopped because somebody couldn't name their body part. Now, I'm going to ask my very good friend Sean, who both as a prosecutor, and he prosecutes some of the gravest murders and manslaughters and rapes and sexual abuses, and defends. And also on the Children Act side, he looks at public law cases where children are being removed from parents, and the local authority are moving them because of abuse. Sean, if I can ask you, my friend, at the age of 5 or 6, or at any age, as a prosecutor, if a child is not aware of his body part, i.e. cannot say the word vagina or penis, will you as a prosecutor drop the case? Sean.
Okay, thank you, Mizan. Good question. The long and short of it is, I'm relying very much on experience of different cases over the years, and I have seen a great movement in the last 2 decades in terms of trying to create a situation where it's easier and fairer for children to be able to communicate, which is the key, when they have suffered abuse or where they may have suffered abuse. So to answer Mizan's question, I have not come across a case where a prosecution has not been able to advance because of simply a name not being said, or the wrong terminology being applied, because it's much more holistic, it's much more complicated than that. The real issue that the criminal justice system and the family law courts have looked at, and in my opinion, there has been a great deal of positive movement, is the idea that we don't, as a local authority or as lawyers or as adults, expect children of 5 or 6 to speak the same language and use the same vocabulary as us, because they're children. And children, of course, have different needs. Children of different ages from different backgrounds may have, all sorts of different capacities. And the whole idea and the movement that we've reached at the moment, which has avoided, I think, the real problems that there were in the past, which were not about not being able to name body parts. It was being able to have a situation where children felt able to communicate. And it seems that what I've noticed the change has been is that now, instead of children having to adapt to us as adults or to lawyers and speak our language, we have to adapt to them. Now, safeguarding issues, therefore, I am extremely interested in safeguarding issues because they touch upon the work that I do, but I don't really deal with, for example, the public law elements of the relationship between the community, parents, and schools. I deal with the aftermath. I deal with the sharp end of the situations that most of us hopefully never have to experience, which is going to court. And again, perhaps it's a long-winded way of answering Ms. Ann's question, is that the problems that arise in relation to getting evidence from children arise from creating a situation where they feel safe to communicate. And things have been put in place in terms of interviewing children, having people who are specially trained that make it easier for them. What I certainly have seen over the years, which varies, but is an important issue, in terms of family law, local authorities, social workers working with families in order to improve safeguarding or an awareness of safeguarding, is again, what's very important is establishing some, not just communication, but some partnership. I note that the NSPCC, if one looks at what they call the pillars of their approach to safeguarding, and it's sort of published on their website, and it's something that they use as a starting point in terms of implementing policies, are a number of principles such as empowerment, prevention, proportionality, protection, partnership, accountability. Now, some of those won't directly affect us as civilians, as parents, but some really do. And that issue of partnership is really important because I've seen cases over the years, many cases where parents who are in a situation where they're working with social services because there have been problems, when there isn't a trust and there isn't proper communication, it is so much harder then really to implement the safeguarding that every child deserves and every family deserves. If you have parents, for example, who are not at home singing from the same hymn sheet, using the same principles as the school, there's going to be a clash. And what I would say in terms, for example, of the issue about, well, prosecutions, have there been prosecutions, or is it likely that prosecutions will fail because simply of a child being unable to name a body part? You know, for years, in family cases and in criminal cases, there are children who have particular needs. Some have needs that are very marked. They may be autistic. They may not just be on autistic spectrum, they may have learning disabilities. And I think we as a society have moved, prosecuting authorities have moved forward to be able to adapt so that we're dealing with a diversity where we are not assuming that children from a particular background will always communicate in the same way. As I said, it's about in my view and in my experience, opening up the communication. And I suppose really the question we're looking at is what are we trying to achieve in safeguarding? One of the things we're trying to achieve is to prevent abuse, but also to allow disclosures, to listen to a child's voice, for the child to communicate. I think the way that we do that is by engaging the trust of the parents and by listening to the children, not imposing on a 5-year-old or 7-year-old or 8-year-old rules and language which actually don't go to the heart of the issue. So it's about respecting communication and encouraging the communication of the children. So that is perhaps an overview of the experience that I've seen over maybe 2 decades now of the change in what I think is a less paternalistic approach in the family criminal courts to a situation where we listen more to children rather than imposing rules upon them. So, Ms. I hope that touches upon.
I'm grateful. Sean, we've both dealt in matters, and I'm sure you would agree, there are times when adults, grown adults, who have been abused either in their young age or very recently. Sorry to take time, but there was a story shared by Honourable Judge Plumstead about a young lady who was on the stand, and maybe you remember this because it's quite widely shared at the bar. The victim could not use the term vagina from the witness box, and she had to write it down because she was embarrassed. This was a young lady giving evidence from the witness box. And I'm sure you've met and you've seen whether it's a special needs child, whether it's a grown adult, that in certain places, in certain circumstances, they're embarrassed to name their body parts. And you know, because they're embarrassed to say it, it has not stopped prosecution, whether it's in the family courts or in the criminal courts. Would you not agree?
Absolutely. I mean, there are different ways of communicating. The question is, if a child is going to be making disclosures for safeguarding, are they able to communicate in a way that we understand? Similarly, in court, is the witness able, and is the court procedure allowing them to communicate in the clearest way possible so that we understand what they are saying? And in the same way as with some children, and again, this is I've seen this in family courts and criminal courts right from the start of my career, been very used to situations where a witness will be asked to look at a body map, which is just simply a drawing of non-gender specific. It simply shows the areas of the body. In fact, it's what GPs use to make notes of where injuries are, accidental or non-accidental. And that's a perfectly good way, when appropriate, of finding out exactly where the injury took place or where the touching took place according to the witness. So really, it's about adapting And we as a society, and therefore the courts and the local authorities and the social workers, being able to adapt so that the witnesses who are vulnerable because of age or learning difficulties or for whatever reason are best able to communicate. So really it's a question of not being rigid and just assuming that we should treat everybody the same. You know, and that goes even beyond important things such as the protected characteristics of religion and other aspects. So absolutely, I think in fact, as Mizan, you say, that's something that has been implemented in the family and criminal courts for at least 2 decades. It's nothing new, and it hasn't prevented prosecutions from taking place, or in fact, local authorities been able to conduct care proceedings where the welfare of the child is the primary factor in the proceedings.
And Sean, one last point. I know our audience is predominantly Muslim, but where there are issues of, and going back to naming of the body parts, even where a child is aware of body parts and knows how to name them, does that naming it prevent them from being abused? Isn't it the question, like you say, it is giving the child, empowering the child to be confident so he or she can talk to mom, dad, or any other member of the community that he or she trusts, for example, schools, teachers, etc.
Absolutely, because I practice in family and crime, which are two areas of law that have very different purposes. Criminal court is about punishment, it's about gaining evidence to see whether or not someone has committed an offence, whereas family is about really ensuring the welfare and safety of children. But certainly the key is always, I think, to look beyond the specific issues and the specific rules and think what is actually the purpose. And one of the purposes of safeguarding is to either prevent or to stop. And if that is about listening to what the children say and having accurate information from them, it's about having a situation that best allows them to communicate. And I know research and practice, certainly in family law, has shown that if a child is in a situation where he or she has a relationship with their parents or with people they can trust who are adults, then they are more likely to be able to then make a disclosure when they're suffering harm, as opposed to sadly cases where children say nothing because they feel afraid to. So that's not really, it's not about the terminology, it's about having a safe area or channel of communication. And I think that can sometimes be lost when one focuses on just mechanically whether or not the right word or the right form is made. Children react in different ways. They're growing and developing in different ways. And as I mentioned before, I think it's about us adapting to their needs and making sure that they're comfortable. That is much more important, in my view, than any specific terminology or vocabulary.
I'm grateful, Sean. Interaction with Danny Hassel, I think he said to me that prosecutions stop because they don't name body parts. So you and I can both say that's a load of nonsense. I want to move to Sam.
It's not been my experience in 20 or 3 years, and I haven't heard of that from the people I work with, in other words, the other barristers in family and crime. So if that does happen, then it is, I think statistically, it'll be interesting to see how frequently that has actually materialized.
Study, darling. I need the meeting.
Not very much.
Not very much. Thank you very much. I'm going to move to Sam. Sam has written the book on religion and law. Sam, you've heard from Sean, and you know that the argument that the local authority use in terms of naming body parts, etc., is one of safeguarding. And parents who object to it are being told, this is the reason, this is the reason. What I want to ask you, and a lot of the questions is, how do we challenge schools? And a lot of it is where schools are sending out surveys or the consultation that they're meant to do, they're doing it via Zoom, they're doing it via sending out information via Twitter, putting it on their newsletter, putting it on their website, and the parents are saying, well, I haven't seen it. You know, majority are saying, hold on, I don't know about this. I don't know that that's the name, because some schools have changed the name from relationship and sex education to health, HSE, you know, and you're thinking, well, that's not the same thing, because the DFE guidance is about RSE, and so HSE must be something else. What is, in your mind, a proper consultation that they should have? And when having proper consultation, what is it that the schools must have regard to? And if parents feel they're not being listened to, what is the course of action?
Okay, well, Mizan, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. And I have to say that I think everybody who is here, who is engaging, and I can see the different types of questions that have been raised, but also, I mean, all the points that have been so incredibly well articulated by the panelists, both in terms of the law, but also in terms of the concerns, I think are, you know, as a sort of community, you're probably way ahead of an enormous number of other communities in this country. I mean, I lived for many years in a borough not too far from Tower Hamlets, but I'm actually now based down in Devon, and I can say as a parent of primary school children, our local school hasn't even got around to consulting yet. And I think that a lot of the concerns that you're raising here as a community are actually concerns that are shared more broadly across the communities, not just Muslim communities, other religious groups, but also other groups, parents who may not even describe themselves as religious. I think there's a huge sensitivity about the age at which these body parts, for example, sexual body parts are being used by schools, and also about LGBT. So I don't think your concerns are necessarily isolated ones at all. Far from it. Anyway, that's a sort of preface. Your question about the consultation, what should a consultation look like? And there is obviously, as has already been said here, a statutory duty for each individual school to carry out its own consultation with the parents. So there are basically three points to the consultation, to an adequate consultation. First of all, it has to be conducted at a time when proposals or the policies are at a formative stage. In other words, the school cannot just simply present a fait accompli and say, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to carry out a consultation, but we're not going to listen to you really because we've already made up our mind. So, you know, you have to consult prior to actually finalizing the policy. Secondly, and this is really important, you have to supply parents with enough information and enough time to allow for a proper consultation. Now, the guidance to teachers, and there's both the DFE guidance, which we've heard something about this evening, which is the statutory guidance and the guidance which needs to be followed by the schools, not the Tower Hamlets guidance. But there's also guidance published by the DFE for teachers, and which tells them how to engage with parents. And that guidance actually recommends that as part of the supplying of adequate information, that they give examples to parents of the kind of materials that they're proposing to use in the schools. It's not mandatory, they don't have to do that, but it's recommended. But certainly what the schools all have to do is tell parents enough of what they're proposing to do so that parents can actually say, okay, we understand what you're thinking about, we understand what you're proposing, and this will allow us to give some kind of informed response to the consultation. And thirdly, the consultation has to lead to a conscientious and open-minded consideration of all relevant considerations, including parents' concerns about age-appropriate teaching, including parents' concerns about religion and faith. And whilst the school is not legally bound to follow parental views, they have to take them into consideration. They have to listen. So I was hearing one of the panelists earlier complaining that the schools, were carrying out some kind of consultation, but they said, "Oh, we don't need to listen." That's absolutely not the case. That would be the antithesis of an open-minded consideration. So those are the three basic principles to any consultation. Ms. We've spoken previously as well about this sort of issue of whether the schools would need to give the information in relevant languages if for example there's a significant cohort of parents at a particular school who are not English language speaking. I mean, those are certainly things that need to be considered. And if the school isn't translating and you've got parents who don't speak or read English, then there should be sufficient time to allow perhaps a parent-teacher association or somebody to translate into the relevant language. But what you can't do is simply put out questions and not give sufficient time, or have very closed questions which don't really allow parents to give enough information and raise their concerns. One example of that was a question where you say to parents, right, do you think you should be teaching sexual body parts in years 1 or year 2? That's a closed question, because a lot of parents would say, well, I don't think they should be teaching that in any of those years, or indeed in any year at primary school. So so it has to. The question should be framed in such a way as to allow people to give their full view on what they want to say. So that's on the consultation. What can you do if the school hasn't carried out a proper consultation? A number of panelists have been urging parents to be proactive in this sort of area. I mean, as parents, you should complain to the school. You should complain first and foremost to the school and the governors, the head of the governing body. And if the school doesn't deal with the complaint properly, then of course your next line would be to the local authority. But first and foremost, you should be engaging with the head of the school and complaining. Now, it'll obviously help you if you've got a number of parents who are behind this. And so, and it seems to me that you're a very well networked community, in the sense we've got a very large number of parents here this evening. But you want to mobilize as many parents as you can when you're writing and making the complaint to the school. Ultimately, if the school ignore it and the local authority refuse to engage or refuse to accept that there's anything wrong with the consultation, then you would in principle be able to judicially review or consider judicially reviewing. But that's a very heavy-handed approach, and one has to act swiftly. You have to act within 3 months of the consultation, the flawed consultation, and you would also need to take legal advice, because there are costs implications to carrying out a judicial review. So it's not something that one does lightly. But anyway, that in a nutshell is what you can do and what the consultation should be doing. Ms. Ann, does that answer your question?
It does, broadly. There are other questions I have. somebody asking, my school refused to show any material during the consultation period, stating they did not have any lessons planned yet. The consultation period ended in mid-Jan. Few parents voiced concern at the fact that we do not have had meaningful feedback because of the lack of information provided. In general, what I am seeing, this is what it is. The schools are pushing through the agenda, and it is, I think you and I have had this conversation before, where I believe the DFE guidance, whether it's about naming body parts or whether it's about same-sex relationship, it is not a straight jacket, and they're asking schools to look at the school population before they write their policy. Tower Hamlets have put it as what I would say a straight jacket. And what the schools are doing is, rather than have headache, they are just following that guidance. And yet again, we have parents who are saying the schools are not listening to me. The schools are not listening to me. Part of the problem, I think one of our other panelists said, and you've so eloquently put it, is that you need more parents to speak up. I've had instances where two parents have turned up and they've said, you know, we've had 100% feedback from those who attended. Well, there's a class of 60 and two parents turned up, so they've had 100% turnout. In terms of, I know JR is the sledgehammer sort of thing. How would one articulate a push to the school or to the local authority here? Because let's put it this way, if one is judicially reviewing the school, local authority are simply going to say, well, really, this has nothing to do with us, because in our guidance, we say it's up to the schools, because that's what they do. That's where they cover their back, by saying it's up to the school to write their own policy. This is just guidance. And so our legal opinion, which has said it has no legal standing, is right. But the schools will then be left to sink or swim. How do parents, concerned parents, who, you know, trying to push the envelope, and there are a number of parents who have issues, whether it's language barrier, whether it's technological barrier, where they are not able to join a Zoom conference, and there are those who are not able to speak up, you know, because they're embarrassed. Or there are those who are saying, well, we will be targeted, our kids are going to be targeted, we're going to be reported to prevent, which, you know, sounds to me as another formal complaint, because that shouldn't be happening in the first instance. How would you address that?
Well, I mean, there are a number of sort of different things. I mean, on the question of, you know, for example, parents not having access to Zoom. I mean, the schools need to be, you know, careful about how they, you know, supply the consultation. Ideally, it would be supplied in multiple formats so that you would, you know, cover all possible bases. In other words, you might put it into the, you know, the newsletter with a link. You might send by email to parents a link, but you might also print it out so that those who don't like using computers or don't have a computer, then they've got it too. So and again, that may be a, you know, that sort of decision may very much depend on the cohort of parents and on how big the school is, and, you know, how feasible it is. But that's, you know, something that, you know, it may be that the you know, the PTFA, or that there may be some sort of, you know, individual who's working with that school who can sort of assist that process. In other words, if the school says, okay, well, you know, we've put it out, we've given the parents the link, there are very, very few parents who we believe don't have access, you know, to a link. So, you know, we're not going to print out a paper copy for 500 children to take home. But, you know, but but a PTFA could say, right, well, anybody who wants one, just let us know and we'll supply one. You know, in other words, I think, you know, each individual school, hopefully you'll have some motivated parents who will be able to sort of liaise and assist. The other thing which may be helpful is to, I mean, look at this, not as just as a Muslim specific issue. I mean, I'm talking, for example, about the labeling of the body parts, because I don't think it is. I mean, in my rural, primary school here in Devon, there's a lot of innate conservatism about these sort of issues. There will be parents who would articulate, they're not Muslim parents, but who would articulate many of the sentiments that I've heard this evening. They would feel embarrassed, at naming the parts themselves in front of children. They, I'm sure, wouldn't want their children in years 1 and 2 hearing it. So it may be useful to try and reach out to other local authorities or other schools where they've taken a decision not to teach body parts, for example, at the early years, and draw on that. I mean, I've also been a governor previously of 4 primary schools, and I had the early years unit as my sort of specialist area, and so I sat through teachers teaching safeguarding issues to years 1 and 2. And the terminology that they were using was, this part of my body is private. Nobody should be touching it. If somebody does touch it other than myself, I need to report that. And that works perfectly well in my view. So there is legally no requirement to name sexual body organs at Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2. And we've already, Sean has already explained, there's no safeguarding issue. And so I think it's partly about parents sort of, and this group that are here this evening, helping each other and in mobilizing and sharing sort of information. But it may also be useful for Mizan, for you or some of the other groups that are represented here this evening, the East London Mosque, LMC, to perhaps draft a short document setting out what the basic position is in terms of requiring of consultation, what it should involve, and just setting out what the sort of the key legal positions are, so that everybody's aware, and then having it translated. And that may assist parents, when they go to liaise with their individual school. They can actually say, look, I've got this document. I know, I understand what the legal situation is, the legal position is, and I think it may empower some people.
I am grateful for that. Thank you very much. The other question, and I know we've touched upon it, the reason I haven't labeled any specific term, whether it's the same-sex relationship or naming body parts, far as me and other parents like myself are concerned with, it is a question of timing for us. And I think somebody wrote, I, as a parent, should know when the time is right, to teach my children various things. In terms of LGBT and same-sex relationship, could I ask, as a lawyer, to you, and somebody who's written the book, what protected rights do I, as a religious individual, have? For a Muslim who, for me, same-sex relationship is a sin, full stop. And in order for me to say to my kids, it's a sin. In terms of teaching my kids this at primary school level, is it recommended? Is it a must? Is it a statutory duty for schools to teach or promote same-sex relationship in schools? No,
I mean, there are two aspects to this whole new regime. One is the teaching of relationships education at primary level, and then the other thing is the teaching of relationships and sex education at secondary school level. So sex education does not have to be taught at primary school level. It could be taught, but there would be an automatic right of withdrawal for any parent who didn't want their children to have sex education at primary level. But in terms of LGB discussion in primary school, it's not legally required. So primary schools have to teach the different types of families as part of the relationships curriculum. So, for example, a school might teach children, well, some families, have, one parent, some families will have two parents, some families, there might be, two mummies, some families there might be two daddies. That's teaching about relationships. There's no requirement, no statutory requirement whatsoever at primary school for schools to talk about things in terms of LGBT. And I mean, I say this, as a parent too, I think it would be confusing for many young children to be given those labels, and not necessary, because it's not necessary for them to understand that label, as opposed to being accepting of different types of families per se, because of course, as one of the other panelists has already said, in any given school cohort, there will be all sorts of different family situations in children's homes. I think the confusion has lain legally is that the Ofsted guidance has said, as regards primary schools, that before the start of the summer term of 2021, if a primary school does not teach about LGBT relationships and does not yet have adequate plans in place to meet the DFE statutory guidance, the inspectors will comment on this in the inspection report. So that suggests that there's some sort of legal requirement to teach LGBT relationships at primary school. But as I say, I think there's perhaps a misunderstanding in this, because I think there's a difference between teaching about different types of family, but there's no legal requirement to detail or label or describe those different types of family as LGBT. So this is a primary school level. There's also, and the guidance makes this quite clear, the guidance is not does not require any teacher to speak against their own religious views. So it's acceptable for a teacher, for example, to say, I am a Muslim, I personally don't consider a LGBT relationship to be in accordance with my religion, but nevertheless, they may have to, as part of the relationships curriculum at primary level, they would still need to explain that there are different types of family situations, different types of relationship. So the guidance, was not intended to put religious teachers who are themselves religious, or parents who are religious in a position which would directly conflict, I think, with their religion. They found it's found a sort of way through. I mean, there is a tension on one view, which you've identified, Ms. Ann, but I don't think the guidance DFE guidance causes the conflict.
No, and we are on the same page, and I think most of us in here are on the same page as this. So what we are asking is the schools to go back and look at the DFE guidance when consulting, and look at the DFE guidance and not rely on London Borough of Tower Hamlets. for whom, you know, some parts they've made mandatory. You know, what can be, what is mandatory in Tower Hamlets may not be mandatory in Southwark. How does that work? But I would like to bring Brother Noor in. He has a question for you. Brother Noor, I will ask you if you can come on and ask any questions you have, or the question you have for Sam.
Thank you very much, Sam, for highlighting a lot of important information for us. There's a theme that's currently running through a lot of parents' minds, and also some of those who may work in schools and be teachers as well. That and it is the kind of fear of being branded as an extremist, and the whole issue of prevent and referrals. That parents are feeling very scared that, oh, if I speak out, I'll be called a homophobe, homophobic, and then thereafter there's a prevent referral, then my children, then all of this whole issue that arises from that. And so the question really does come about is, how can parents, you know, is this right, or is this okay? And what means do parents have to be able to challenge the issue based on their faith? And as Mizan mentioned it, you know, it's not just the issue of just same-sex relationship. We'll take it even further. You know, in Islam, you know, the Muslims, the belief is that the only relationship is in a marriage that is between a man and a woman. So even the relationships outside of a marriage are not things that are the thing that we, as a value, we would promote, irrespective of the same gender or not. You know, so that's even going even broader. So you know, it just comes to question, which is, how do parents actually can address this, feeling confident that, you know, they shouldn't be referred to kind of prevent and all of these issues, and that scaremongering basically. And there's been some questions here of somebody who's worked within the council and teachers within schools who have been kind of moved off departments because they raise too many questions, and they're fearful of their jobs even because they may be kind of demoted or moved on or even referred.
Yes, and no, thank you for that question, because it's actually, I think, a question which goes even broader than, you know, what we're talking about here, you know, education and religion. It goes, you know, it cuts across, you know, issues relating to racism as well, you know, that I think increasingly people, you know, on from all different types of background actually feel quite nervous about having open discussions about, you know, issues that they know, such as religion, such as racism, which are very, you know, very sensitive. And yet, of course, first of all, legally, you know, there is a right to freedom of religion. Legally, there's a right to freedom of expression. I mean, expressing, you know, views in articulate and thoughtful and even emotive ways, you know, is permissible in this country. Hate speech is not permissible, but articulating viewpoints and articulating, of course, you know, one's religious viewpoints is absolutely protected by law. So again, it may come back to this sort of idea of perhaps putting out, you know, a document which actually, you know, makes it, you know, very clear that, you know, people are entitled to their own religious views. They are going to have respect for those religious views within the legal framework and within the education system. You know, in other words, just setting out in perhaps maybe 3 or 4 pages what the basic, what the basic legal rights are for parents and religious parents in this country, because I think that people understand what their legal rights are. That, you know, I think gives, you know, at least it gives people some sort of way of expressing themselves, where they should know that they can't be reported to prevent, and they can't be called out for views which are, you know, said to be abhorrent. Yes, people may disagree. That is a democracy. You know, we people will disagree with each other. You know, one doesn't want to shut out views, and one doesn't want to shut out debate. I mean, that is the death of intelligent discussion and furtherance of, you know, life in this country, in my view.
I'm just going to ask Sean a question. Sean, there are a number of questions that are popping up in terms of parents being prosecuted and parents being asked various questions in terms of being reported to prevent and etc., which is a threat. As a prosecutor, when you see a charge that isn't fully made out, what is your duty as a prosecutor by law?
Well, I mean, your duty as a prosecutor, I mean, of course, a prosecutor could be me as prosecution counsel, which is when the case is up and running and has reached a court or is about to reach the criminal court. But in fact, the other prosecutor on any case is going to be the CPS lawyer who deals with a case right at the very start. So although I sometimes will be brought in or counsel will be brought in, for most cases, you will have a referral from the police then contact CPS. And at the first stage, there's a threshold test, which is whether there are reasonable grounds or there's reasonable evidence for them to charge somebody. And once that charge has taken place, then you move to the next stage, which is when things go to court. And in terms of whether a case is strong enough or it continues, basically what you shouldn't do as a prosecutor is simply form your own view that, well, if I were on a jury, this would work, that wouldn't work. There needs to be consistency, and the consistency comes from the Prosecution of Offences Act, where there is a two-stage test where the CPS lawyer or I at a later stage will have to look and say, is there a reasonable prospect of conviction? Which means, is there enough evidence upon which a jury, applying the right principles, could find somebody guilty? Because of course, in any particular case, if there's enough evidence, you may have jurors that have a particular view and may agree or disagree. Quite frankly, you may have cases where in one part of the country, just because of the configuration of the 12 people you found, you may be found guilty or not guilty, depending on that. But the prosecutor has to be the filter who says, is there a reasonable prospect of a conviction? The second test is it in the public interest? And I think in most cases, that's easy. If it's a case, for example, of a child or somebody suffering harm, then it's obviously in our interest as a society for that to continue. There may be some cases where, for example, you may decide not to, it's not in the public interest. If for example, you have a victim of a sexual offense who is 13, the defendant is 14, they both have marked welfare needs, the question would be, well, do you need to prosecute? And that would depend on the individual circumstances. So it's a two-stage test. Is there enough evidence, and is it in the public interest? And that is a statutory duty. That's the Prosecution of Offences Act 1985. So in theory, every single prosecutor should bear that in mind, but also at regular stages throughout the case, because it may well be that a case seems to have strong enough evidence, but as time goes on, the victim or alleged victim, for example, may provide another statement and say, I'm not really sure, I'm not quite so clear about it. So we have to, as a prosecuting authority, as prosecuting agents, make sure that every stage we apply that test to avoid there being miscarriages of justice.
I'm grateful for that. Sean, I think that clearly shows just because somebody threatens us with some sort of an exposure or prosecution, it is not just up to them. There is safeguarding put in place that malicious prosecution doesn't take place. And of course, if it does, there can be inquiries into why that's taking place. Sam, the question for you, you're somebody who I've known for a number of years, but and I've dealt with other communities. Have you seen other communities deal with these types of issues, and how have they dealt with them? For instance, whether it's the Roman Catholic or the Protestants or the Jewish community or the Hindu community or the Sikh community, how have they dealt with it? I know you've said this is about everybody. So if you have any experience, please share.
You mean in relation to these education?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, issues. So, I mean, I haven't, what's interesting about this particular moment is that I think I honestly think that, and I say this to you, meaning it in an incredibly positive way. I think you're ahead of the curve. I really do. I don't think that lots of other communities and school communities are engaging with this at this level right now, and nor have they mobilised, this sort of large network that you have, and sort of really thought about it. I can honestly say, hand on heart, that if as and when the parents in a number of rural primary schools in across the country find out what's being taught, they may be horrified. Actually, they just won't have thought about it or discussed it at all. Maybe because they're not as acutely aware of what's going on, and also I think because some of the schools haven't upfronted in the way that Tower Hamlets has. Tower Hamlets is sort of, I think partly because there is this history of engagement with the Muslim community, and they don't want to disengage, but they've also got they've also decided to kind of meet this sort of tension head on, in a sense, by putting their own guidance out. So they've brought it to the forefront, and lots of other local authorities won't do this. It's not been helpful in Tower Hamlets. I think that's the problem. I think it's been counterproductive, them issuing their own guidance. What I would say about the prevent thing, just going back, because I'm actually involved in a case at the moment where my clients were interviewed under prevent, and actually a small child was interviewed at a school under prevent, for safeguarding and concerns about radicalisation. And there's an NGO called Prevent Watch, which a number of you may be familiar with. But if there are concerns about the way that the prevent policy is impacting on individuals and on the community, then it's worth obviously trying to get hold of legal. But if not, communicating with Prevent Watch, who are an NGO that are representing individuals who are impacted in that way. Yeah. So sorry, I can't say more. I don't know more than you do, Ms. Anne, about other religious communities and their concerns at this stage about this. But I think we'll see them. I think we may see them. And then the other thing to say is, of course, that the news has been so heavily focused on the pandemic, that I think it's swept a lot of other really important things that have happened in the last sort of 18 months under the carpet, which is unfortunate.
And I think you're right. In terms of what we're seeing, it is the pandemic, and that's the issue that's highlighting. So we're not seeing it unless there's a demonstration outside a school somewhere, and that's been reported. I'm just looking at the time. We have been on for a very long time, and there are a lot of other questions that I can see that are being posed. I think we have covered quite a bit, and I think if those who are still on here want another session, then maybe those who have organized this, we could get another session. So in the first instance, can I just say thank you to Sam Knights. Absolutely wonderful. You have highlighted some of the issues and some remedy as to what parents can or can't do going forward. Putting together a document, getting everybody together, pushing your head teacher. I think Sheikh Shams has just sent me something which is interesting, and it says the local authority, the DFE guidance does actually talk about, it's with the parents. They have to be consulted. It is not just the issue of the school. It says ultimately it is the school's decision as to whether parents' strongly held views will lead to adopt, and when and how. Can I just say, for everybody who's listening, parents here do not object to the thrust of what the DFE guidance is. That is not at issue. What it is at issue with the parents is the mechanics of, i.e., when is the right time? When are we as parents are going to get a say? So Sam, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you very much. for coming in and giving this community, these parents in Tower Hamlets, your precious time. Sean, my friend, my stablemate, I know you're stuck in some station somewhere.
No, I'm in Chambers.
Oh, you're in Chambers.
Yeah.
You've made it back from Nottingham to
not quite as bad.
to get into Chambers for this, and you still got to get home. It's 8:30.
Not all. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure and a privilege.
I can't thank you enough for your wisdom and your wise words. Thank you very much, Sean. Sheikh Ashiq, Sheikh Shams, Dilowar Khan, Abdul Qayum, Sister Sufia, Sheikh Ahmed, Brother Noor, you are the leaders. You've heard what needs to be done. You know how it needs to be done. Sheikh Shams, you said it. Our politicians who come knocking on your door, okay, for your votes, our local MPs, Asma Begum, I'm going to call them out, Rushnara Ali, Afsana Begum, John Biggs, all these guys will be knocking on your doors. They haven't come here today because they are under a veil or the pretense of a veil. They should have been here to hear the local community and hear what is happening. But they've used the parda excuse not to be here. Thank you very much.